It's Imran Shah, spokesperson for the Muslim Public Affairs Committee. That's the UK's leading organization for empowering Muslims to focus on intelligent political activism to demand their rights. He's joining us from London in the United Kingdom. Brother Imran, thank you so much. Good morning.
Good morning. Thanks for having me.
It's a pleasure indeed. Well, a very strong stand, I must say. A call for the United Nations to really take actions against the France's breadth of state of abuse against Muslims. What does this mean? And upon submitting this complaint, has it been received with open arms?
Hello?
Yes, I'm here. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Yes.
Sorry, I think it went silent for a second.
Oh, all right, yes. Yeah, I was saying just tell us about the submission of this complaint to the UN regarding this France's Islamophobic crackdown of Muslims.
So, yeah, I mean, as you mentioned, this complaint consists of signatories of 35 organizations from 13 countries. It was actually partly drafted by the Muslim Lawyers Association you have in South Africa, and also supported by the Association of Muslim Professionals there in South Africa. And we worked with a number of lawyers here in Europe and a number of organizations, including MEND, Cajun here in the UK, as well as US organizations such as CARE and UK Institute as well. So very high profile, but also very sort of a lot of the main signatures were from Europe, where we're facing a lot of this Islamophobia. So in terms of the complaint itself, there's two formal complaints to the UN, and they're on two essentially fundamentals. One is that we assert that France is in violation of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights and the International Covenant of Civil Political Rights, particularly specific to its treatment of Muslims, especially in the last year or two. And also the second one is specifically in regard to targeting of Muslim children and in violation of the United Nations Convention of Rights of the Child. So there's a whole raft of evidence that we've submitted for this, and we have gone back to as far back as the 1980s. However, a lot of the evidence is focused on what's happened in the past year and also in the year before. So to give you some examples, one, and all of these examples are from this particular year. So one is the introduction of number IDs for children who go to school, and the idea is that the French government wants to track and also crack down on those children that may be getting homeschooled from parents. This is obviously couched in the language of extremism, and as we've seen over the last 20 years, the word extremism is synonymous for Muslims. So, we already see exactly where this legislation is going to be disproportionately applied. There has been a number, as of late of this weekend that has just gone, a number of illegitimate and violent raids of Muslim homes and organizations. And all of this is happening as the Minister of Interior in October of last year said, just to send a message that we are going to be hard on the Muslim population. And there's now it's been essentially Muslim organizations have been strong-armed into accepting the idea that it will be the French state that will be approving the imams. There will be no ways for imams to practice without state approval, and this is something that is very specific to Islam in France. This is something that's not obviously happening in Christianity and Judaism and any other faith. And of course, there is the dissolution of the two major Muslim organizations of the past year, CCIF, human rights organization that tackles racism as well as Islamophobia, regularly holds the government to account for its activities on racism and Islamophobia, and a disaster relief charity, Baraka City, that has essentially been in existence for at least 10 years and is operatable in 16 different countries. So they have been dissolved. Almost no evidence of extremism has been put forward. However, the state has power to dissolve them. So these are very specific examples, but there are many more. It's just to try and illustrate the level, the depth of crackdown that's happening upon Muslims in France and how it's impacting their everyday lives.
And I'm looking at these policies are not only counterproductive, but they are open to abuse, and they have been abused themselves, while also being completely out of touch with the reality.
So, I mean, there is no illusion that these policies are being abused. They're, because it's already framed around quote unquote the Muslim problem. It's in the same sort of language that ironically Hitler used with the Jews, because it's already kind of focused on a particular minority. They are already people are already aware. There is no doubt that they will be abused. So, I mean, the situation is that with the weaponization of secularism that is essentially Macron is talking about, even by French secular standards, yes, it means that religion cannot be part of the state, but it also means the state cannot be involved in religion. Yet Macron is intervening on French Muslim institutions and beliefs and daily experiences, as I've mentioned. And the way he's justifying this is by saying that the Muslim community has a separatism problem. Now, the problem is that French Muslims, they work, they pay their taxes, they engage in French democracy as any other sort of French citizen does. They are citizens of that nation, and yet when they excel, when they try and essentially have a political voice, they're called something that essentially separatist. Yet we don't see the same sort of attitude of, say, far-right neo-Nazi separatist movements. And you have to ask, what is the self-interest for Macron in this? And the problem is that the National Front, which is an openly fascist organization, they're essentially looking to. They're the second party. That they're the ones that are essentially essentially second in the polls when it comes to the presidential elections in France. So what Macron is trying to do is trying to play the electoral game, and unfortunately, time after time, when we see this sort of pressure, politicians like Macron don't understand when you normalize far right and fascist sort of policies like these, it only emboldens and normalizes those particular political parties. So instead of playing the principled politician, he's chosen to be a weak politician, and he's chosen to essentially try to play towards a crowd that actually is not going to benefit him in the elections.
And of course, when one look at the script Macron and France have against the Muslim population in France, it's clearly like showing Islamophobia and hatred, of which I think that after this submission to the United Nations, the action needs to be taken, like action, not just media statements. But what are you guys as an organization hoping for?
I mean, first of all, there's a number of functions of this UN complaint. First of all, Macron would rather have this conversation go away. He, really came back into the Arab world in particular when, the boycott was happening because of that happened late last year. He would rather be able to do his own thing with little resistance. So this is essentially assert that actually, no, we're watching you and we're accounting for every single thing that we're doing, and we're pushing for means to hold you to account diplomatically, politically, and any other way. What he also asserts is that this has to be a moment in which Europe has to look at itself, not just politicians, but especially civil society organizations, Muslims and especially non-Muslims, who may have more influence in Europe, and that you need to take what Macron is doing more seriously, because other Islamophobic political parties and groups will see what Macron is doing as a template and look to try and replicate it there, in the same way that they looked at the UK Prevent Counter-Extremism Defence Strategy and many of the narratives that are now global, kind of really sourced from that into that piece of government policy. So that's the second thing. The third thing is to say to the UN is that, look, just because this is being rubber stamped by a French Western nation doesn't mean that you can be silent about this. You have to respond, and there is a role for you to be accountable. Now, yes, there are many issues with the UN, but at least it means that we are saying to the world at the same time that this is a serious problem and it's going to affect all of you. Like an erosion of human rights on this level is going to spread to other parts of the world. And, in terms of action, the first main thing is mobilization. So this is the first time we've seen Muslim organizations across the whole world mobilize in this way on a specific issue. So that's something that has to be acknowledged and celebrated. But secondly is that, well, all right, we want to essentially create that coalition. How essentially do we create pressure upon not just France, but the political players like Macron in France? The boycott is one thing. Furthering that boycott and making sure that we can put pressure upon the political parties through a boycott would be grand. Another way that I've just mentioned is trying to lobby civil societies to essentially reach out and speak out. So what I'm trying to illustrate to you is that it's getting increasingly the case that European Muslims kind of need the help of the rest of the world to fight the battle. Like, after 20 years of Islamophobia, it's getting to a point, like we kind of see with the Islamophobia in India, it's getting to a point now where we need the help of the international community, global citizens, wherever you are in the world, South Africa, America, Australia, Malaysia, wherever you are in the world, Latin America, people need to speak out what's happening in Europe, because by what Macron is doing, by doing the stuff that he's doing and what other politicians are looking to do in, say, in Austria and the UK and Holland and various other parts of Europe, it shrinks the space in which accountability can happen here. So there's a number of different messages here, so I'll try and crystallize that. One is that if you want to be part of this, then at least speak out and be part of the global voice that is trying to essentially talk about Islamophobia, especially in Europe. And two, contact us, contact myself, MPACUK, or CAGE, or MEN, contact the Muslim Noise Association in Africa. Try to reach out, be part of this coalition, and three, essentially try and when we do get together, let's try and think about how we can essentially assert pressure on a much more global level.
Absolutely. And then looking at this coalition, what are some of the proposed legislation against the separatism? What's it focused on?
So I've mentioned them already. So a number of them. So it does include the IDs for children. Mm-hmm. It does include the statute sort of powers. So for approving state imams, there will also be a counter-extremism strategy. Ironically, that's going to be essentially funded or taxed by Hajj funds. Ironically, from taking money from Saudi Arabia to fund this. There is asserting that Muslim institutions, whether it's like masjids or whatever else, like, you only really can play a religious role in France. Any form of political voice or any political role or commentary it would not be allowed. Like, if you are a religious institution, that's it. Your job is just to practice religion, stay in your mosques, just pray, just do whatever you want quietly, but never essentially speak politically and hold the powers to account. It's these sort of measures that essentially they're concerned, they're worried that a minority is essentially growing independent of the state and holding it to power, and that's what the separatism bill is designed to do, is to essentially control and to a growing a stronger a growing Muslim population that is growing stronger year by year.
Absolutely. Brother Imran, I thank you so much for coming through